Welcome to Thrashcast episode 18. This week we're going to be talking about Machine Head's seminal classic Burn My Eyes that came out in 1994. This is going to be a really good talk tonight, and we'll see. There might be some disagreements about the significance with the album, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But before I do, let me usher in my partners in crime, both Jim and Billy. And how are you guys both doing tonight?
Awesome.
Good.
Good. Glad to hear that. All right, guys. So before we start, I just wanted to mention where you can find the podcast. Again, this is our episode 18, so we're motoring along week to week. You can check us out on horrormetalsounds.com. You can also check out our YouTube channel for the Thrashcast, and that's at Horror Metal Sounds at KenG.2468. And, you can also find us at our Spotify if you want to hear an audio version only of the podcast. So just another little thing just to add, if you are viewing us on YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe. We do appreciate it. The likes and the views are going up week to week, and we do appreciate the support. Comments that you leave in the videos is great, and we try to answer all the comments, and we're just happy to be talking about Thrash. So before we begin tonight, I thought we'd start off with our usual news items. And Jim, why don't you go ahead tonight?
Yeah, just a couple of things. So the first thing I'm just going to talk about quickly is the Voivod documentary. We are connected. So it's all ready to go. So they're going to be premiering it at the Fantasia International Film Festival in Montreal, Quebec, which is very suiting because, Voivod's from Quebec, on July 29th, 2024. And just to give the Metal Voice a bit of a plug, or anybody can check it out even on my own Facebook, because I shared it there. Jimmy K does a great interview with the director, Felipe. So some really good information there. And this sounds like it's going to be amazing. And I think they said it was about 2.5 hours long, so it's pretty cool, or around 2 hours. But it sounds like it's going to be really, really great, and that's awesome. A couple of things I received in the mail. Billy talked about it last week, but my 200 stab wound. Pre-order finally arrived, manual manic procedures, and I gotta tell, everybody needs to pick this up, even if Absolutely. You're not even it's not a thrash album, it's a death metal album, but holy geez, this is going to be on so many lists for top albums of the year. Like right now, it's definitely going to crack probably my top 3, and it's just fantastic album. And the another one I picked up, which is Ingested, another sort of death metal, deathcore band out of Britain. The Tide, it's got a really cool cover, and it's got a really cool title, The Tide of Death and Fractured Dreams. This came out in May, and I never pulled the trigger on it, and I don't know why I didn't. I could stream it really at any time, but I just got it last week, and I just absolutely I've fallen in love with this band and start checking out their back catalog. It is just fantastic. Some great musicianship, some really harsh, and then some really clean vocals. And they've got, I know on a few of their past albums, they've had some guest female vocalists that aren't necessarily totally famous or from the metal movement, but it's really, really neat. And you got to check out some of their videos on YouTube. Really, really cool stuff. And just some really good videos. It's just awesome. Everybody should check it out. But that's what I got, Ken.
Cool. All right.
Sorry, Jim. One quick. Did you say the Voivod's premiering at Fantasia Festival?
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. As someone who grew up in Montreal, I used to go to that festival every year when I was cool. In university. And actually, oddly enough, the theme is like Hong Kong, like Asian movies, action movies. So it's kind of an interesting mix that they would go to that festival.
Actually, that used to be, Billy. It's not anymore, and now
it's not.
It's become more of a horror festival though nowadays.
Oh, it's still called Fantasia.
Yeah, it's called Fantasia. So they do carry they do show a lot of wide variety of movies, but they've been more so. I know because I have a lot of friends who attend every year.
Yeah.
It's more so horror based these days, but they
Oh,
used
it
to
could
show a
be,
lot
yeah.
of Hong Kong action movies and stuff like that.
Okay.
Wicked.
I haven't been in 30 years, but I'm just stunned the festival's
Yeah,
still going.
it's a very popular festival. So I mean, I know there's
Yeah.
tons of people I know here, and like in the horror circle, they go to it every year and have a great time. So
Yeah, I
Wicked.
love it.
it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Billy, how about you? What do you have for news or anything you're spinning this week?
So for news, a quick thing. I think it was today. It was announced Destruction
Yeah.
released a new single. So very interesting. So they chose a fellow German metal band, Accept. They're doing their classic song "Fast as a Shark." So it's kind of cool, right? Like I don't think it's. I mean, it's a song we all, us old metalheads know so well.
Yep.
So it's hard to hear a different version of it, but I think they do a pretty good job. I mean, I
They
probably
do.
prefer the original, just
Mhm.
mainly because that's what I'm used to, but definitely has a thrash feel to it. So I think that's kind of worth checking out. And then in terms of what's spitting, I know Jim's already hit this
Oh,
one, and we got a review on Thrashcast, but my copy just arrived. It was late, so
Wow.
yeah, I mean, killer album. Read Jim's review, but yeah, I mean, they retained all the raw energy of the original, but like,
Yeah.
I'm someone who's picky, right? Those first, the first EP and the two albums by Sepultura, like the sound quality just drove me nuts.
Mhm.
mhm.
And these guys have brought it like up like a whole other level, but still kept all the original like power and rawness. So yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. Can't recommend this thing enough. But that's it on the news front for me.
Okay, perfect. Well, I don't have much either. I did see that destruction story. The single came up, but I figured one of you guys would have been talking about that since it was like released yesterday. I think there might be a new album. I guess there's an album going to be
Yeah,
in the works, I would
Mhm.
assume,
yeah,
because that is the second single they released. Because they do the what was that one? No Kings, No Masters, like
yeah. Like
last
last
week.
month, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm assuming there's a new album in the works, which is it's cool. Another Destruction album coming out. I can't. Hopefully it's good. These two songs are pretty decent.
Hmm.
So that's all right. I didn't mind it. I was listening to the song today and I thought it was all right. But well, I agree with you, Billy. I prefer the original Accept version instead. But you know, we'll give it a go when the album comes out.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm going to bring up was that I think I mentioned this to you guys last week. I was watching NikkiBlakk, her YouTube channel. She did a podcast with Chuck Billy, and Chuck came on and he just talked about the upcoming Testament album. He was mentioning that it was going to be a lot more. The material is going to be a lot more aggressive, and the influence of their new drummer Chris Dovis has really lit a fire under Alex his ass and the whole band's ass to get more aggressive sounding music. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. Chuck went on to say he was mentioning that they do have a couple songs covering environmental issues and artificial intelligence. So that seems kind of pretty cool. He says that Dovis and Eric Peterson are working really good together as a duo, writing the music and stuff. So I'm kind of curious as how this album's going to sound. So that was kind of cool. He's all like hip and fired up for it. So when that comes out, I'll be buying that album for sure.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah. Okay, I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. And then for spinning, I don't have much. I was listening to this new band called Dead Monarchs. Now it's not thrash. It's more like doom stoner, a little bit of death influences in it. They just released an independent album called what was the name of the album here now? Um, yeah, it's what was it called? The album's called Titan. The song I heard was Galactic Blast, which was pretty good. You can catch that song on YouTube, Spotify, even and if you go to their Bandcamp page, they got some stuff up there too. So I thought it was pretty solid. They're from England. I love the cover. The cover caught my eye right away, and yeah, so I thought it was kind of interesting music. But yeah, if you get a chance, check it out. It wasn't too bad. But that's all I
Can I
have
have
this
one
week.
more? Can I
Yeah,
ask
go
one
ahead.
more news item I forgot about, which
Absolutely, go for it, Jim.
ties into my Voivod thing? Is we gotta like give congrats to Dan Mongrain for
Yes.
he's going to be joining up with Forbidden Chewy.
Yes.
So it's like, I mean, what a guitarist to pick up here. This is like good for them. I think this is really, really cool.
Although he's only filling in from what
Yeah.
until they find a permanent guy to replace Steve Smith.
Still though, I think you know what? I think it's just gonna really, that's just gonna be awesome. I think this is great. So
yeah, I know that's a great choice. I mean, I don't know what his reputation is like in the United States, but I mean, in Canada, we all know him well from his own band and, of course, with Voivod. So you're right. It will be a good choice.
Yeah.
So
I think it'll be interesting to hear them, right? Like, he's going to have to stick to the guitar parts by the book, right? Like, if he starts putting his own touch on it, it's just going to sound like weird for Forbidden. So yeah, I'd love to see him play with them. Like, I think he's just going to play it by the book, like not play with his personal touch.
Are they at Walk-In this year, Billy?
No.
Okay. Because I was thinking if they were, then you'd probably have a good shot to hearing them with Dan with what Chewy playing.
Yeah. At least I don't think so. Unless they might be at Bloodstock. Actually, I'm going to check after the podcast. That's a good point.
Okay. I was just curious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's good for them. I mean, they're motoring along. New guitar player, new singer. Yeah. What the hell? Let's hopefully and I'm sure there'll be new music on the horizon soon. So that'll be another treat for us old Thrash fans. But it's all right. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get into the our main topic of the evening. Before we do discuss Machine Head, I did think about the time when the album came out, the significance of the style. I know we had some back and forth discussions about it last week. I know Billy was mentioning. I was telling Billy about listening to it last week just to get myself back into it, and so Billy was talking about the album too. So I was thinking beyond that about the questions that I had in mind. So the first question I wanted to ask was kind of like okay, so like the 90s was tough. We all know the 90s was a tough time for thrash bands with the beginning of grunge and then all the subtle changes in the mid 90s to thrash. I just wanted to know, what bands do you guys think from the 80s, I guess, made it in the 90s unscathed? Do you think there was one band that stands out above the rest? Let's start with you, Billy. What do you think?
Yeah, so I definitely think there is, and this was a somewhat easier question given we've tackled this on like many of our podcasts.
Yeah.
So for me, it's Sodom. And the minute you shared the question, I went there. So 6 albums in the 90s, which is pretty impressive to start with, right? So 3 of those 6 I would rank. So what do they have? Like, what was it? 16 albums, I think.
16 albums.
So 3 of those albums, Better Off Dead, Tapping the Vein, and Code Red, I would rank up there in my top 6 or 7. So right away, that's like a really good sign. 2 of them, Till Death Do Us Unite, and Get What You Deserve. I think they're pretty solid albums, but I would rank them a bit more towards the end of the discography, but I still think they're solid. And then they have one miss, which I wasn't as big of a fan, Masquerade in Blood. So, yeah, so for me, I think as a whole body of work, and to have that much work in the 90s, I think is pretty impressive, right? And although they went a little punkier for a couple of those albums, but like Code Red was an all-out thrash monster.
I love Code Red. Yeah.
Tapping the Vein was like death metal pretty much. So yeah, like I think it was a good mix of output and Masquerade in Blood, even though I wouldn't say it wasn't good because they went too far with experimentation or got lost in the 90s. I just think it wasn't a well-written album. And, for a band who has 16 albums to have one bad album, not so unusual. So yeah, for me, definitely Sodom without a doubt.
Okay, cool. And Jim, do you have a band that you think is pretty good for the time?
I kind of figured Billy was going to pick Sodom, so I went with. I know I'll get some flack for this, but only because I went with Creator, and I know there's a couple of stinkers in there in the '90s, but you're looking at 1989. We have Extreme Aggression. Okay, I know it's not the '90s, but we're heading into '90s with 1990 with Coma of Souls, which is probably could be one of the top thrash albums, probably in my top 5 or top 10 of all time. So I mean that Renewal in '92 was a little bit weak. Cause for Conflict and Outcast and Endorama all kind of they shy away a little bit of their thrash elements to some degree, and then kind of get into a bit more of maybe a punky goth kind of vibe. I don't know, but it's still they still were pumping out albums. I mean, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got 5, and then you have 1989. You've got Extreme Aggression, and then you come out with 2001 Violent Revolution, which is a lot more kind of realigning the whole 90s thing. So I would go with Creator, but yeah, Billy's right. I mean, Sodom probably more true to form in that sense, where they only really had maybe one in my mind that was a little bit off the mark. But I mean, when you think about it, I think probably even the Teutonic Four, the German Big Four, probably put out a lot more true to form stuff than even the American Big Four to some degree. I mean, I know in 1990, you had Megadeth popping out a great album, and then Metallica with the Black Album, but I don't even really count that. So, but anyways, it definitely was a bit more of a weirder time, and a lot of these bands tried to have maybe a little bit of a Pantera vibe to it at some point, and maybe that's where that sort of that goth kind of sound mixed with kind of a thrash metal-y kind of musicianship kind of comes out. But yeah, I would pick Creator for me.
Yeah, I don't think you're far off with Creator. I think they for me personally, like they still stuck to their thrash roots. They just kind of rejigged it a little bit. I mean, Endorama might be the only one where it's a little bit off, but I don't even mind Endorama. I actually have a soft spot for it. For me, it's not one of my favorite albums, but I don't mind it for what it is, for what they were trying to do at the time. Cause for Conflict, that's okay. I mean, like, they went like as well. Maybe what Billy was saying about Sodom, they went to a bit of a punk vibe at times.
Yeah,
especially with the vocals. Millie's vocals went a lot more harsher and a much more punkier style. But I think that's a good choice. Those bands are two good solid choices. For me, it's like I would agree with you. I'd almost want to put Destruction in there, but their output in the '90s isn't that great. Although I'm just going to put this in here for a second. Crack Brain is one of the best thrash albums of the '90s in my mind. So for me, I mean, I'm going to stick them in there. I mean, obviously their output in the '90s, we all know what came after that stupid Cannonball album, which was god awful. But I mean, really, they didn't have a bad album either in the '90s. They were still motoring along too. So maybe at the end of the day, the German scene is where it was at. They didn't change like what happened in the States, where all the American bands made drastic changes to their sounds, and everyone did, like Anthrax, Annihilator, Testament, all those bands, Metallica especially, because they changed a whole different kind of style of music altogether. So yes, you're right. So maybe the German scene is probably the big winner here when you think about it at the end. That they're all those bands, and maybe even Tankard. Although I'm not as familiar with Tankard, Billy, you're a Tankard fan. What was their output like in the '90s? Do you know offhand?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say kind of off the top of my head, I'd say Tankard was always a band that's, had their share of mediocre albums too.
Right. Right.
So they had some inconsistency, but they weren't a band who went in any drastically different style.
Right.
So yeah, they have some good albums, some bad albums, but all within the tankard realm of like
Okay.
thrash. So
Okay. Yeah, I sort of thought that, but I'm not as familiar with their discovery as I am the other three. But cool. So
Also,
basically, yeah, go
too,
ahead, Jim.
Megadeth put out Risk in '99. I mean, that was
Yeah,
just that's their worst in my mind. There,
Stinko.
I can't even tell you what. Like, there's maybe one song that's palpable, but the rest of it's just absolutely dreadful. You know,
Yeah,
it's just the way
yeah.
it was, I guess.
It's funny. I was listening to Anthrax all last week, all the John Bush era stuff, and I'm going, it actually wasn't all that bad, even though it's not thrash. The style is more like, I guess, metal, maybe a little bit of groove, a little bit of like kind of Pantera style groove at times. But I don't think it was actually all that bad. I think, evolution in the 90s had to happen. All these thrash bands in the 80s eventually would evolve and change and try something different. And the band we're going to talk about tonight, I think, is a really good example of where it started and what everything that kind of spirals out from Machine Head. But we'll get to that in a sec.
but the
So
funny
question,
thing, Ken,
yeah,
sorry, I was just going to say the funny thing is, when we talked about all those bands experimenting in the 90s,
yeah,
we all loved the fact, like in the 2000s, they went back to their old
Yeah,
styles, right?
exactly,
So I
yes,
guess
yes,
in fairness, we're not as open to the experimentation, right?
true. No,
But
that's a
we
good point,
all
though.
had the same view.
yeah,
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. You're right. Like back in the 2000s, everyone went back to the traditional thrash style. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. That's a good
yeah.
point you brought that up. So we'll go to question number two, and this is more of a personal one. So I just wanted to ask you both individually, how did you cope with thrash metal kind of, being on the downside in the 90s? Were you still listening a lot of the thrash? Did you try something different? Let's start with you, Jim.
Well, I think I'm a huge Pantera fan, so for me,
Mhm.
I don't want creator singing Pantera. I want creator being creator. So yeah, Billy makes a good point that we all talk about. I'm not open minded at all when it comes to it. I think I'm like, this is what I want and this is what I need. I don't mind, as I brought up before, bands tweaking, but Metallica broke my heart when they did the Black album. I mean, I love the Black album's a great album, but they just changed too much from then on. But no, I like Pantera quite a bit. I think it made bands like Suicidal Tendencies had some good albums out in the 90s. I think like there was a lot of even death metal bands. It kind of went a little bit, Cannibal Corpse and all kinds of my I think it went a little bit more for me, went a little bit more underground and kind of off the beaten path a bit. And that was like just kind of how it happened, I guess. It was like,
Mhm.
okay, this is the direction it's going to go in, and so that's where I went. I mean, coming out of the '80s, I grew up in the '80s, same age roughly as you guys. Went through the whole hair metal thing, and I was kind of, by the end of 1989 or 1990, these bands had to go. I mean, they were turning into a more of a recipe. So you had a band come out and it was like, I don't know, Trickster, and we're gonna put out an album, but it's gonna have one ballad in it. And then somebody came out with another band and we're going to put two ballads in it, and then it's just turned into something that was just contrived by the record companies and giving us what we wanted. And there was hair bands. I'm getting off topic here, but like Cinderella, and that first album wasn't bad, and I mean,
No, it was
they had some,
good.
yeah, and they kind of kept going and that sort of thing. And then there was other bands that just kind of prescribed to the prescription of what they were supposed to do. And they signed away all their rights and they didn't do, it was just, that was the sort of the nature of the beast. But then you had something like, you had the grunge movement come out, which I was sort of a fan of as well. I mean, I like Nirvana. I consider Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, especially their first few albums,
Yeah,
metal albums in my mind.
yeah.
And I liked Pearl Jam back then. I don't really listen to them much anymore, but I was glad when that went out as well. And Pantera kept going, and we kind of got this new sort of this new sort of life to it, especially when the 2000s hit. So I fared up pretty well. I was disappointed when bands started disappearing off of labels, but I got to, you can only listen to Warrant, like the same album. Like, you can only listen to it so many times before the record company probably was like, okay, we just squeeze these guys, and for what they could give us, and that was it. And lo and behold, I'm going to bring up Motley Crue, and Motley Crue's self-titled album, which was kind of a little bit more Pantera grungy, kind of had that sound, is my third favorite Motley Crue album with John Corabi. Right. I think he's a way better vocalist at that point than Vince Neil was. Vince Neil was blown by then. I mean, Vince Neil's solo albums, that song from the Encino Man, You're Invited, but your friend can't come. It's just the same rehashed garbage. And then they brought in John Corabi, and then they obviously, at that point, they were big enough that the record company still said, no, you guys got to get Vince, we got to get Vince back. The fans aren't buying it. But I got to admit, that album's really, really solid. And it would have been better for them to come out with a different name, maybe, because everybody thinks, Motley Crue is Vince Neil, Nikki Sixx, blah, blah, blah. But, if they would have came out with a different name and had a new lead singer, and it was something like even like what Scott Weiland did there when he brought it with Slash, the band there.
Velvet Revolver.
Velvet Revolver. I mean, much, that's what you had to do. You didn't want to come out as Stone Temple Pilots, which he couldn't, and it's not Guns N' Roses. So I thought what they came out with and made an offshoot of it was pretty smart. And I think if Motley Crue had done that, it would have been they could have even named it after one of their songs or something, whatever.
Or Generation Swine. They could have just named the band Generation. I think that's a great name. Generation Swine. I would have dug that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, there were some hints of what was going on, and I think that's a classic example. And John Corabi's, I mean, now Motley Crue would kill to have him. I mean, he's freaking the Dead Daisies. These guys, he's a great vocalist, and he would fit in there in my mind, more so than Vince Neil's. Kind of turned into a little bit of a kind of an embarrassment, unfortunately, just with he's blown his voice out. So
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I get you.
And Jim, you were a big Striper fan, no?
Yes. Well, their 90s output turned
inside
me on.
joke. Keep going.
Yeah. Anything else to add, Jim?
No, that's everything. Thanks. Sorry, it took so long, guys.
So let's hear your thoughts, Billy. What were you up to back in the 90s with music?
Yeah, no. So, and just a quick thing. Apologies if I'm mumbling a bit, but I'm recovering from dental surgery yesterday. So I don't know if I am mumbling a bit, but if it is,
no, you're good. You're good, dude.
Still kind of swollen here, but yeah. So from a 90s perspective, for me, metal never slowed down, not an inch. And I've always liked all the different styles of metal. I mean, to this day, even except for black metal. But so for me, so thrash died, right? Like, and you could see when we do our top 10, like everything I have is like 90, 91. I think I have 192, but that's proof. But there were three things to replace it with, right? There was death metal, and I like death metal as much as I like thrash. So that was still going strong, like in the 90s for a good chunk of the 90s. But then the other thing was progressive metal. Right, so Dream Theater was dominating in the 90s. I love 90s Dream Theater, but in that same category, you had Symphony X and Fates Warning. I think all those three bands were three of my favorites in the 90s, and so you got that. And I'm not naming death metal bands because the whole genre I love. I'll be here all night. But even things like, so then the European power metal scene, I think we have to say in the 90s, right? Because that was probably its peak period. So you look at something like Blind Guardian, right? Like almost many of our favorite Blind Guardian albums came out in the 90s. I know mine did. Sabotage, many of my favorite Sabotage albums were in the 90s, right? And then you had those like European bands. not all from Europe, some from South America, but bands like Angra and Conception, Elegy, Heaven's Gate, and Rhapsody and Labyrinth from Italy, like all this amazing like power metal, but not cheesy power metal, like power metal with like some good technical musicianship on it. But even take Gamma Ray. I mean, that was one of my favorite bands of the 90s, right? They were just going all, releasing albums all through the 90s. So yeah, I mean the metal changed a little bit, but it was no less of a metal scene, and I didn't find myself deviating away from metal in any way. It just changed in substance and form a little bit.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, for me, it's somewhat similar. Like I was still following like yourself, like Megadeth, Metallica, Anthrax in the '90s. So the big four was still something I was listening
Oh
to.
yeah.
But funny, I started art school in '89. So when I went to art school, I met a lot of new friends. I was in college and met all these new people. And one guy that I met in particular, he was really into industrial metal. So when I met him, he got me hooked on industrial metal. So I was in the '90s. Although I still listen to metal, a lot of the bands you guys both mentioned, I heard and liked. But I really got into like Ministry. I got into KMFDM, My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, Pigface, Nine Inch Nails, Lard, Chris Connolly. The list goes on and on. There was so many great bands, and the reason why I liked industrial metal is because a lot of those guys, it was aggressive music, maybe a little bit different, but still they were throwing in like thrash riffs and heavy riffs into the music. And when you're hearing KMFDM, it's just it's like taking Exodus and making it a bit dancier at times, but that wall of sound, it'll just blow your ears out. I love that band. Seen them live a bunch of times in the '90s, and it just blew me away. Same with Ministry. I love Ministry. I love
Mhm.
where they started and where they went and the kind of music that they added. And they were bringing in thrash guys. I mean, they had guys from Prong in the band. They had guys from Rigor Mortis in the band. Like Al Jurgensen really brought in a lot of players to help him with that music. So it's kind of fascinating. But yeah, the '90s was kind of where I went. I mean, I did like grunge. I mean, I didn't mind Alice in Chains and
Mhm.
Soundgarden. But I was still listening to like Flotsam and Jetsam in the '90s and
Oh yeah.
all those bands. It's not like I changed. Just
Nope.
it's just a style change, like just a different focus of music. But that's where I was in the '90s, like when it came to more like industrial metal, which is I'm still a fan of to this day. But in the '90s, it was huge for a good amount of time. But okay, so the last question, it's pretty basic. I just wanted to know what were your thoughts about Pantera in the '90s? I know Jim, you just kind of mentioned it that you were a fan.
Yeah.
So go on with that, Jim. So you might just
Oh
go
yeah,
on.
I mean the first time I'm not taught like and the first time I heard Cowboys, that was an
From
amazing
hell.
album,
Yeah.
and then Vulgar, it just kept going. Reinventing the Steels, yeah, but there's some great stuff in there, and I really liked it. I mean, Dimebag was amazing. Is an amazing player, and just
Hmm.
with what happened with the tragedy, I mean, just kind of blows your mind. But and then you had sort of the kind of you had the Zach, you had Zach Wild, and then you had Pantera. So you had some great stuff there, and I just thought I love Pantera, and those first few albums were just Far Beyond Driven's a great album.
Hmm.
I've got the live, I think it's 101 Proof, that's really good, but then they sort of obviously fell apart quite a Phil ended up having issues, and then I mean eventually we all know what happened, but no, I mean I think they were the big sellers. They were the big act of the '90s that kind of kept the embers kind of going, and and that was great. I think that's what it needed, and you can tell because a lot of the metal bands we've even talked about have changed a little bit. When we did the Cracked Brain episode,
Hmm.
there was one album that did have a little bit of a Pantera kind of vibe to it, and we're looking at not Cracked Brain, but one of the other albums, and when we bring a lot of this stuff up, when we did the Sacred Reich podcast, a couple of the albums there sounded just like they were just trying to emulate to some degree what was popular at the time. So, hats off to them. I think they were needed. And I know I think it has kind of some people really like them, like myself. Some people are like, they're not keen on the music. They find it's got a little bit of an industrial vibe to it. And I think even what we're going to talk about is got an industrial vibe to it. And I think that's what came in as well. You had the heaviness, but then they brought in kind of different elements to kind of round it out a little bit. I think it was just the time. So, but no, I was really thankful that they came along when they did.
Cool. And how about you, Billy? What do you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, so we say the 90s, but I also like Pantera in the 80s.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Before they broke it big, right? What was that? Like 4 albums, I think?
Yep. 4 albums, yes.
Yeah. Before that, Phil was only on the last one, but yeah. So I don't mind. I mean, I loved Cowboys from Hell when it came out. I thought that was really groundbreaking.
Yeah.
It's hands down my favorite Pantera album. I also liked Vulgar. Didn't mind Far Beyond Driven, but the band they started to lose me, right? Like when Phil was just about, can I shout as loud as I can?
Yeah.
My like I loved him on Cowboys because he was still singing.
Yeah.
But then like slowly the vocals became, which is I guess the reason I don't like some of these modern core bands. It's just, and I know that sounds stupid for someone who likes thrash and death metal to say the vocals are just screaming, right? Like on this metalcore stuff. But like, yeah, like I don't know, like I'm just not a fan of just yelling for the sake of yelling. And so yeah, I mean Pantera kind of lost me on the last couple albums, but yeah, I mean, I think that Cowboys from Hell, like I still listen to it on a regular basis, and I got to see Pantera on the Cowboys tour and the Vulgar tour, and yeah, those were great shows. I had a blast at those shows. I still remember them. I believe they were in Montreal at the Spectrum, which was like a classic concert venue, but it's gone now. So yeah, I liked them, but I liked them less as their career went on.
Yeah, you could see where they fractured it a little bit over time. The Abbotts, I guess they had a different thought in mind, and you had Phil. He was very he was very vocal about what he wanted to do. Oddly enough, I interviewed Phil about 10 years ago. Really nice guy. I was part of the interview junket that he was doing that day. So I was the last interview of the day, and I did this for Horror Metal Sounds. And he first thing he says to me is he goes, "Dude," he goes, "I'm fucking done. I don't want to fucking talk." And I was like, "What?" He goes, "No, I'm just kidding with you. I'm just." So I was like, "Okay, I'm Phil. Are you okay?" So it was all right. We had a really good, like a 30-minute talk. But yeah, I think he lives and breathes music, which is great. Obviously the first few records that he was on, like you guys were just saying, are pure classics. I mean, I appreciate what Pantera has done. I'm not sure I'm liking the whole kind of Pantera reunion today, but it is what it is. And the Abbotts, the family is like giving him, I guess, their blessing to do it. So I know there's people.
I saw the show. I think it was good. I got to say they did justice to it.
Okay. Good. Yeah, I figured they would. I didn't, you got Charlie Benante and then you got what's his name on guitar.
Zach.
So I mean Zach, yeah. So I mean, they are good players. So it would be I'm sure they would do it justice, but I just read though, I think it was last week that it was brought up to Phil, would they actually record new music? And he's like, well, we haven't thought about it, but I almost got the impression that, yeah, they would if maybe the right circumstances, the money was there. I don't know, but it'd be weird with a new Pantera album without the Abbotts on it. I don't know, but
yeah,
I guess time will tell if that actually happens. But
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah, like I mean, if they could make money, I guess I wouldn't be surprised if they would try it. But like when I saw them here in Toronto, it was sold out, right?
yeah,
They played the Budweiser Center. It was like 15,000 people. I mean,
Wow.
oh
this is
yeah, yeah,
Pantera in like 2024, and they're bringing in 15,000 people in Toronto,
Yeah.
right? So
yeah. But
I don't know. I mean, there must be people who buy that album.
Oh yeah.
well, I also think out of that 15,000, there's probably a lot of people who never saw Pantera.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, yeah.
So for them, it's like their only chance to come and see at least two members of the
Yeah,
four. You
yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah. No,
So I
totally.
can see why that would draw people in.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not the Abbots, of course. I mean, what are you going to do? But you're getting two of them, so I guess that's better than nothing at all, right?
yeah.
They
No,
they
that's
also
fair.
did they also did the one night with Metallica for their big tour.
Yes.
Yeah,
So I mean, you know what? No slouches. I think, hey man, you know what? At first I was a naysayer, and then when I saw some live clips and I heard all the fan reaction, I thought to myself, you know, why would I judge it if the family's cool with it? And you know what? Go do it. I love hearing the old songs, but I mean, if they want to put out some new stuff, I'm saying, as long if everything's respectful and done with everybody's authorization, I'm good with it as a fan.
Yeah, and I like Zach. I mean, I've always liked him and Ozzy, and I do like Black Label Society.
Oh,
So
they're wicked. Yeah.
I think he's a good choice to fill in for Dimebag. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, I get it. Some people may not like him, but I don't know. I mean, Pantera will are a legendary band. There's no question. Like Cowboys from Hell is an amazing album.
Yeah.
yeah.
I still like the older stuff before he came on to sing, but yeah, they had a lot of really good albums over time. But
Yeah.
so their
And
influence, yeah. Go ahead, Billy.
oh, sorry, I was just going to say, and
Yeah.
Zach and Charlie, weren't they specifically selected? Not because,
Yes.
I mean, they are good musicians, but
Mhm.
they were selected because each of them were like best friends
Yeah.
Yeah,
with the person
that's
they
right.
replaced, right? So there's that personal connection, I guess.
Yeah, because in the '90s, Dimebag was pretty much like an unofficial member of Anthrax because he was there doing solos and hanging out with the band. So it kind of it makes sense that Charlie would want to. And I've seen a few interviews, and Charlie's pretty honored to be granted that opportunity. So yeah, I would think at the end of the day they were handpicked. It makes sense, but
Mm.
you know, I don't know. Well, we'll see what happens over time. But I included Pantera in this because some of the groove is
Mm-hmm.
from their music is seeped into a lot of thrash bands in the '90s, and of course we're going to talk about Machine Head,
Yeah.
and they're all about the groove. They're still thrash, but they're all about the groove. And about one of the reasons why I think I wanted to talk about Machine Head is for a few reasons. One is because they're like Bay Area thrash, the second wave of Bay Area thrash. And then they came in coming with a new sound and sort of start throwing in the groove. So it certainly changed the sound of thrash metal or in music in general. I was talking to Jason last week, and he was mentioning in his mind he thinks that this album brought in the idea of nu metal, and I could certainly see that. I was like, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense because another band Skin Lab is another band that I would bring up because Steve Esquivel, who was in a thrash band previously. What was he in now? Oh shit, the name's escaping me. He's from Bay Area thrash as well, and he started Skin Lab. So I mean, you can see where some of these thrash guys or musicians are starting to try something a little bit different and then take it and see where they could go. So the '90s certainly was a great time to do the experimentation. So
And Ken, are these guys even still around? Like
who?
Machine
Skin
Head?
Lab? Machine Head? Yeah, yeah, they're still around.
Huh.
I know there's been some fighting with when Phil Demo walked away from the band. There was a lot of nasty fighting. Oddly enough, I think there's right now it's him, not Phil, but it's Rob, the bassist Jared McEachran, and I forget who the current drummer is. There's only three of them currently. So I know there was a huge like infighting with Phil when Phil Demo left, and he was extremely pissed at Rob. And I don't know. I'm not too sure if it was over money or if it was over like musical direction, but clearly Phil had had enough and walked away from the project. But yeah, Machine Head's still around. I think they're still touring. So,
Hmm.
but
Yeah, I never hear them anymore. So I
Oh.
don't see them at festivals. So I didn't even know if they're still going.
I think from what my understanding is, Rob was taking a bit of a break for a
Hmm.
while because I guess he was going through some personal things. Because Rob has always fought, like he's always fought drug addiction. Like he was addicted to heroin. Like even at the start when they started Machine Head,
Hmm.
and apparently when they were first signed by Roadrunner, the first thing they did was go do heroin to celebrate, which is odd. You got a record deal, and the first thing you're gonna do is go, do some heroin. But life of a musician, I guess, right?
Hmm.
It's crazy. So, all right, so we'll dive into Machine Head. The band was formed in Oakland, California. This was originally a side project by Rob Flynn, so he was still a member of Violence when he started Machine Head. He eventually left in October of 1991, and then basically Machine Head became his main band. One of the quick rumors, though, is that people thought Machine Head was taken from the Deep Purple song, of course, but it's not. Apparently, it had nothing to do with that. Obviously they I guess would be considered like pioneers of a new kind of sound, like a new metal approach with the groove and the thrash that you got like on later releases. Stylistically, they kind of bridge the gap between Bay Area thrash and groove and new metal influences. So they kind of encompassed all that in the sound. They went on to an extensive tour in the first year of their existence, and unfortunately, because of that, their drummer Chris Contos bowed out because I think he couldn't handle the touring. So they replaced him with Dave McLean from Sacred Reich, who came in to play for many years in the band. I always kind of pictured this band as kind of think maybe Chaos era Sepultura with Pantera thrown in there and some Fear Factory bands like Skin Lab as well. This is kind of a mix of sounds, but
And
and
Ken, do
oh
you do
yeah,
you hear any Ministry in their music?
yes I do. Yeah,
Yeah, that was the other thing I got out. Yeah.
yeah. There are some direct references. I feel like because well, we're going to talk about the one song
Yeah.
that's pretty much an industrial song, but it's basically Ministry.
Yeah.
They've taken it verbatim from Ministry, which is fine. Which is fine. It was always, I guess, it was the time frame, right? The other thing I just wanted to know before we start is that the cover was done, and I know we mentioned this on our best thrash album cover art by Dave McKean, and Dave is a huge DC Comics artist who did Sandman and Black Orchid, and I always love this cover. It's design oriented. It's not really a painted cover. It's like digital design, but I always think it's a great cover. One of my favorites. So okay, so let's deep dive into the album here. The first song is Davidian, which is a really good song in my mind. Jim, what do you think of the song?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really good opener. I think it's got a heavy industrial kind of groove to it. It's a great drum intro and it's a great drum track.
Mhm.
At 105, you get those kind of thick screams that just light up the track, and I think the vocals are. I've got a very industrial feel about it.
Mhm.
And he's got kind of these heavy, kind of slurry vocals at times, which I really like. Has definitely kind of a Pantera sound to it. And then
Mhm.
around 3 minutes in, I mean, it's got a wicked cool guitar solo. And then around 350, it just turns into like more of a heavier, slower chug. So I really like it. It's a good song. I really like it. Great way to start off the album and pretty much, I guess, start off their careers. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah, and this song is the one that people remember the most.
Yeah.
And I've read that they play this song. It's like one of their a fan favorite, so they play it pretty much at every show, which I can understand. And
Yeah.
Billy, what do you think of Davidian?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with my disclaimer as I did on the Anthrax
Go
podcast.
for it.
So, and again, this is just my
Mhm.
view, and my view is
Sure.
no more important than anyone else's view. Like I'm just not a big fan of this album or this
Mhm.
band or many of the styles that they're all mixing together. So I guess not surprising, I'm not a big fan. I did go out of my way to find things I like about each of the songs.
Mhm.
So to give a bit of a here's what I like, here's what I don't like. So yeah, with this track, I like the opening, like the heavy riffs are cool.
Yeah.
The good drumming, like I'm gonna say the drums,
Yeah.
I think, and the bass are quite good throughout this whole
Mhm.
album.
Mhm.
There's some really good, strong drum tracks. For me, though, I think this song just reminds me of a mix of like post-Arise Sepultura
Mhm.
and Pantera, right? You throw that into a blender, and this is kind of what I get. But my biggest issue with the album, and it's like this on almost every song, like the thing I like the least is the vocals. Uh,
Really?
like I
Oh.
just really, again, not to sound like me, but like I hate the vocals. Like on
Okay.
pretty much some tracks more than others, but I just don't like the singing style. Like I don't like it when he's slow,
Wow.
and it's way too slow, or when he's like singing, like the faster parts, like
Mhm.
it still doesn't click with me. He's got effects on
Mhm.
a couple of the songs,
Mhm.
but I'm
Mhm.
jumping ahead. So but yeah, like musically it's not a bad track, right? It's got some
Mhm.
pretty good like mosh parts to the song, and as I said, the drumming's pretty good. Like if you could get that vocalist out of there and give me another vocalist, I might actually like the track.
Okay.
Um, but yeah,
Well,
that's what
I actually like Rob Flynn. I
Yeah.
like his vocals.
Yep.
I don't mind his vocals. I think he's a really good a good vocalist because he's able to do a lot of things that some vocalists can. Like he's got the roar, so he can do the Max Cavalera roar when he needs to. He can sing softly. He can sing clean.
yeah, no, you
I
can't.
what's that?
No, I agree. He has like a decent range.
Yeah.
I just don't like the style he uses in
Sure.
those ranges, but
Okay.
that's me. So
That's fair. I mean, it's not for everybody.
yeah,
I like him as a vocalist. I this song I like a lot because the lyrics are iconic. Because that "Let Freedom Ring" with the shotgun blast is such a great lyric. I love it. And obviously, the song is about the Branch Davidians, the cult, the David Koresh cult.
yeah.
Mhm.
So basically, the song is about that, which is I find interesting. So because it was a very bizarre story when the FBI like stormed the compound and then Koresh killed himself and everyone involved. So I think it's an interesting song for that. Yeah, it's very heavy. It's very groove laden, so you got to deal with that. I mean, sometimes I will say that the groove can be a bit monotonous at times. I like it, but I sometimes like it when you get to the bits where it's just pure thrash, where they start doing the chugging and the riffs, and then
Yeah.
it gets great. The trouble with this band is that they just do it in segmented parts I like, and then parts where it's like, it's all right, but I think it's a new style to some degree because it's more like a lot of groove laden riffs that really drive the majority of the songs. But as an opening song, I can see why this is considered iconic and why, if you go online and read comments, most fans will always go back to Davidian. And yeah, I think it's a pretty strong song for me.
I think that's a
So
good point, Ken. The like one of my issues is as I go through, like I do think all the songs they have multiple segments like to them,
yeah,
and there's like the softer segments I often don't like, but I'll like the heavier ones, and I find they some of the songs are often too long, like
yep,
many of them are 6 minutes and up, and they
yep,
could have like cut out or cut those segments in half
mhm,
because I find sometimes they overstay their welcome a bit. But anyways, but yeah, I just that comment you made like totally resonates with me.
yeah. I mean, I have that same feeling. I mean, I'm not I won't call myself a huge fan. I mean, I bought a bunch of their albums and I like them.
Mhm.
I did like the Blackening a lot. I thought that was a really good
That was
album
the best. Yeah.
when that came out. And I find a lot of what I hear here, you hear on the Blackening. So they kind of flipped the narrative and went back to the beginning and brought some of that into the in that album. But um, it works. I don't think every song works. I mean, I've read comments like every song's killer, But I'm like, no, I don't think every song is killer. I think parts of the songs are killer, but not every song. So we'll go to the next song and we'll go to Old. So Billy, what do you think of Old?
Yeah, so this is going to be a common theme. There's going to be sections I like and sections I don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the opening is kind of cool, like some heavy groove. You can hear some upfront bass, and so that's pretty cool. Some
Mm-hmm.
good chunky guitar riffs stand out for me on the track. But like, that chorus though, like it really, that melodic, like to me, it sounds like it has some grunge like influence to
Yes.
it. And like I got to be honest, like I absolutely hate grunge music. I hate industrial music. Like
Fair enough.
I don't like later era Pantera, and I don't like Pantera. I mean, Sepultura's Roots or Chaos album. So
Okay.
obviously, I'm in trouble with this album. It brings like all those aspects, right? But that gives you a bit of background where I'm coming from with this.
Sure.
But so that's the problem there. Uh, but again, there's some really good riffs in the song, right? There's components that I really like, but as usual, the vocals kind of ruin it for me.
Okay.
This one's not as long, so I don't find it drags on too much. But yeah, there's other songs I like better than this one for sure.
Okay. And Jim, what do you think of Old?
Yeah, I mean, this was what, the second single.
Yeah.
I think the musicianship on this song is really tight. Like, I like that cool bass intro. I
Mm-hmm.
just don't like the distorted vocals at parts of it. And I think
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know what it brings back to me? It's like Mick Mars's solo album he released there in the spring. I
Okay.
feel he had a younger lead singer, obviously younger because everybody's younger than Mick Mars, but he had a singer and some of the singles he's singing kind of like through a megaphone. I find that's been done a million times, especially in the 90s. At this point, it was probably cutting edge, but
Yeah.
re-listening to the song, I'm kind of like, you know what? The vocals on this one, and there's a lot better songs on this, I think, than this song. But musically, like the musicianship on this song is really, really cool. I love that bass intro. But I find it's very Alice in Chainsy, kind of got us from their first two albums. And I don't know. It kind of got that distorted megaphone sound to me. And I think that it's been done so many times that when I hear it now, I just can't stand it. So I think that's probably resonating with the fact that I'm thinking back. But I know when I first heard this album, I mean, I love this album. So it's probably my second favorite by them. And I mean, but yeah, I don't like the vocals on this one.
I think you guys might be referring to when he shouts Jesus wept.
Yeah.
I couldn't even like I had to go back. I'm like, what is he saying here?
Yeah.
So just the way it comes across. But yeah, I think the vocal effects that they add in, which I know is something that's very complimentary towards industrial music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it kind of works. I mean, I can see where he's kind of bringing it in to make the song unique, but I can see where your mileage might vary here on this song. What I do like about Old is I like the fact that the lyrics are very subjective because are they talking, because it's at one point it's like, are they talking about religion being old, like an old man, it's old and stale. So it's interpretive. I like it for that reason, but I can see what both you guys think about the song, where it's interesting, but there are some problems with some of the vocals. So I get that. I totally get that. I like the song overall. I don't think it's a bad song. So we'll go to the third track here, and that's A Thousand Lies. And Jim, what do you think of A Thousand Lies?
Oh, I like this one much better. I mean, this one here, I find the vocals kind of switch back to more of a Phil sounding from Pantera. I get a super Pantera sound from the song. It's definitely got an industrial intro, but I don't mind necessarily. Like, I like Ministry. I like their latest album.
Yeah, me too.
And I think it's got a place. It's not my favorite genre of metal or music for that matter, but I really like it. I think it's got a really cool, it's a heavy track, and it kind of realigns itself from track 2. I think it's a really good song, and one to, it kind of like, okay, for me, it made me feel like, because I haven't listened to this, I'll be honest, in probably a few years, other
me
than
too.
probably Davidian. I've listened to maybe on a playlist that I do. I think I have that and maybe one other one on there. So, but anyways, this song really kind of recalibrates it for me, and I like it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And Billy, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I like it better than the first two.
Okay.
So the chorus is kind of catchy actually. Like I
Mhm.
find the vocals in the chorus is not bad. There is a part in the song where the singing is it's weird. He uses, I don't know what you call it. Like it's kind of like a mix between like singing and spoken word and like rap.
Yes.
I don't know if you know what I
Yes.
mean, but like
Yeah, I
I
do.
did,
I do.
yeah, like I didn't enjoy that part, but I liked his singing in the chorus. I thought that was pretty good. The drums and the bass was quite good. Uh,
Hmm.
but like like I feel the song drags a bit. Uh,
Hmm.
like at over 6 minutes, like I don't think they introduced enough new things in the song. Like so it
Hmm.
got a little repetitive by the end of the 6 minutes. But again, there's some really good like crunching guitar in here that reoccurs throughout the track. But yeah, so I guess I could say I don't mind it, but here I guess my compliment would be I don't not like all the vocals. uh but yeah, musicianship wise, I didn't think it was bad.
Yeah, I think it's funny what your comment about some of it does get stale. I think having heard the whole album a few times over the last few days, I do think that yeah, like it's great in parts, but sometimes it's like I just think the overuse of certain things like the groove, the overuse of groove is kind of I find it a little monotonous at times. I'm my ears always struggle with the idea of the groove and then going back to that really nice thrash chug which you get where they'll throw it in sometimes and it's like, oh, this is great. You get that one moment, it's like, wow, but you don't get enough of that. That's the part that I don't like. um and it's funny because I've been seeing people saying that they love this album, they love the style, they love the sound, and that's great. I don't have a problem with it, but yeah, I could see where yeah, I can kind of I'm kind of in between where you are, Billy and Jim. I'm in the middle. I like the album. I love the experimentation, but at times I can see where it kind of after a while it's like, okay, I've heard enough of this. Let's move on to something else.
Now, I think
And
all those 6 minute songs I run into that problem, right? They're all
yeah,
too
yeah.
long.
No, you know what? I totally I can see your point. I'm on your side with that. Sometimes I think the 6 minute mark is oh, it's a bit too much. And they're not creative enough to have like the highs and lows, like a tempo change. Well, they don't really know how to, I guess, place a tempo change in the song as well. Say Death Angel, who were masters at that when in their music, but different band. But I like the song. I like the lyrics. I like the lyrics, and I agree. The chorus is so great. I love the you tell a thousand lies, you've been told a thousand times. I love it. That's like it's so great, and it's very catchy. You get that right away. Um, it's a decent song, but I could see maybe they could shave off a minute or two. 4 minutes, I think, might actually work better, but you know, it is maybe a bit stronger than old to some degree. All right, so we'll go to track number 4, and that is None But My Own. What do you think, Jim?
Oh, I think the next three tracks, 4, 5, and 6, are my favorite on the album.
Okay.
And I think this one here's got kind of a slower intro, and then the song just rips in. It's got a really cool groove to it. But I think this song has the best vocals on the album. I think.
Okay.
I absolutely love it. This, the next one, and the one after, in my mind, are my three kind of favorites on the album. But no, this one's a really, really good one. I believe it's about. I think it might be about some sort of abuse, but I'm not 100% sure. I could be wrong on that. But anyways, it's a great song. I like it, and I feel that by now, fourth track, the album's getting definitely starting to really pick up some steam.
Yeah. Yeah, lyrically, it's about the idea of being resilient and then finding your inner strength. So there's this idea of abuse and trying to fight back with abuse. So I see it.
Mhm.
It has one thing that I find odd. Like when it starts, you get that like you get that ominous guitar tone at the start, right? And then you get the chug, it kicks in, and then you get that little bite. You guys are old enough to know this because you probably watched the show, The Bionic Man. You get
Oh
that
yeah,
that little part, and it's like that's
yeah.
so weird. And they just throw it in that one, isolating that one little part, and it's like, and then Rob shouts, and then everything just picks up, and you get that great chug, and it goes from there. This is the kind of song for me where I find like it's got some great chugs in small bursts, and then and then you just go back to the weird off kilter. Just it gets weird after a while. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but that's what I think about this song. What do you think, Billy?
Yeah, so this goes back to where there's components I like and components I hate.
Mm-hmm.
Like the thing I like least is like, part, I don't know, maybe half the song is like heavy and quicker, but
Right.
then there's those slow components, right? Like, and I just find it like so, like meandering, like it's so slow
Mm-hmm.
that it kills the momentum, right? Then it gets
Mm-hmm.
super heavy, right? You go between that and the vocals are slow, and then I find it boring. But then you just get this wall of sound that very much sounds like Pantera.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go back to that slower pace, and they're killing the momentum, at least for me. But this one actually has a pretty cool guitar solo, which you
Yes,
don't hear a lot of guitar solos on this entire album, to be
that's
honest.
right.
Um, but yeah, then you get the last 30 to 40 seconds of the song, which is like completely rips your head off, right? Like
Mhm.
it gets into like thrash and like a super quick territory, right? So this one, like, it kind of sits itself in like three spaces throughout the song. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that heavy sort of Pantera groove in the middle is not bad. The fast pace at the end is good, but that slow singing parts, like it's just too slow for me. Like I find it's kind of sits out of place. And this is one too. I guess I do get some like industrial mix in there.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Maybe even a little grunge on that slower
Yep.
vocal part, which I'm not a big fan of either. So again,
Yeah.
parts of it I like, parts of it I don't like.
Yeah. You get that kind of Nirvana a little bit. Like I almost feel like did someone hand a copy of Nirvana to Rob when he heard it? Because it's almost like you get, or just the grunge in general. It's obvious he's pulling a little bit from that in there. But the solo, like you said, the solo is a face melter. I like the solo here. It's pretty strong.
And is that like an industrial? I mean, I know they're not a pure industrial band, but
No.
why do you think there's so little like guitar soloing?
Uh, guess really that's a good question. A lot of industrial bands don't use solos, right? Like
Yeah.
they'll sample riffs, and like Ministry was great at that. Like they were able to take a riff and then sample it and then kind of splice it into the song. So I don't know if that's what the direction they were going for. I would agree. I have the same thought. Like why isn't there no solos here?
Hmm.
And he's coming from violence. So,
Yeah, that's what I
and
mean.
that's all solos, right?
Yeah.
It's like they're a
Yeah.
crazy thrash band. And it's like you would think a lot of that would be in here, but I guess maybe I don't know. I'm really not too sure what was his thought process at the time, but it's different. It's really, really different. All right, and sorry, I think I got everyone. Did I get you, Jim, on this one?
Yep.
Oh yeah, Rage. Okay, yeah, I wanted to make sure. No, you didn't mention anything about Rage, Jim, did you? Rage to Overcome?
No, not yet. No.
Yeah, go for it. What are your thoughts?
Oh man, this is like the top three songs. This would be my 1B or 1A. It's got that cool drum. I love that high pitched guitar intro is really, really cool. And it's got again another heavy groove. But you know what? I think it's fair to say this album, when it came out, I think was Roadrunner's best selling album
Yes.
to date. until Slipknot brought out their self-titled one, which, I mean, we all know where Slipknot kind of came in from there. So, but I mean, this was a super popular album. I think, like I say, this middle part of the album is the best part of the album in my mind. And yeah, I love this song. It's absolutely wicked. It's got a killer groove to it, and there's not, again, it's not like Billy was saying, there's not a big focus on any solos or anything like that, but I think it's just got a really fits perfect between 4 and 6. So with that, with what's coming up even next, I like that one as well.
Okay, cool. And what are your thoughts, Billy?
Yeah, I really like the drum opening. I think that's pretty cool. Like again, for me, I keep calling out the drums and the bass because I think they're done they're done pretty well. There's like a really cool like heavy groove at like the 1.5 minute mark. That's pretty cool. But again, I run into the problem like the vocals are not a good fit, I guess, for my personal taste. But I think musically it gets much better at like roughly 3 minutes. There's actually there's a cool main interesting riff, and then that actually leads into a little bit of a guitar solo. So there's a little something there on that front. But again, it's that case where at times the song just slows down again, right? And then for me, it just kind of kills the momentum. So, but from a vocal perspective, I will say at the end of the song, there's a couple vocal screams that I actually do like. So there you go.
Yep. I could see what you're saying there. I could see that for sure. Yeah. It's not one of my favorite songs either. I don't mind it. I mean, he's talking about alienation and the disconnection to the world. So okay, so maybe it's personal to him. The riff, I think that at the 328 mark, I really like. I think there's a small choice sectioner that really stands out to me, which I really like. But I think it's an okay song. I know Jim likes it, but I'm okay with it. But it is what it is. All right, so let's go to track number 6, and that's Death Church. What do you think, Billy?
So yeah, it's kind of interesting like start, right? Like it's the there's some sound effects and like this demonic like voice or whatever talking. So yeah, I mean that doesn't bother me one way or another. It's another track with some cool bass work. But again, we're going back to this theme, right? When they get back to the slow parts of the song, like that just doesn't work. I mean, it's not like I don't need music to be all out like Angel of Death. Like I like slower songs. I just find this band, it just starts to sound repetitive when they get slow and they get heavy, and so it doesn't work so much for me. But yeah, I mean, this one I think does have one of the better guitar leads on the album. And it does have a pretty cool aggressive ending on this song. So yeah, again, it's when they go back to that slow approach, it just kills the momentum of the song for me. And this is another one, right? It's those 6 minute songs. The minute they hit that 6.5, like this could have been like 4 minutes, and I probably would have liked it much more.
Yeah, I could see that. Before we get to you, Jim, I'm just going to say one thing. I like the beginning and I like the end. Everything in the middle, forget it. I just don't like it, all of it. I like the demonic start. I think that's kind of great. It sets up like, oh, this is like, it sounds like a death metal song. It's not, but it just gets really kind of cool. And I love that the whole chugging groove in the last minute's great. I think it's fantastic. But everything in the middle, nah, it's just not for me. I just don't. It's okay, but I don't care for it. And it's a standard song because they're just talking about about organized religion, which every thrash band or every metal band has written a song about how they hate organized religion. So it's kind of all right. But Jim, you were saying that you like the song, so
I love it. I mean, being
cool.
a big fan of Stryper and organized religion, I really, just joking. I don't like Stryper, but anyways, no, Death Church, this is probably even my favorite on the album. I love the whole thing of it, and I like the fact it's that long. I like the distorted intro with the sort of the very satanic kind of sounding intro with the voice. I think that's pretty cool. You know, at 1 minute and a half, the guitars cut in. I like the high sounding guitars, and I mean, it's a heavy song. At parts of it is super, super heavy, and I think it's got like when the clearer vocals come in, very Pantera sounding to me, and I think that's what maybe attracts me to this song. But these 3, 4, 5, and 6 are my favorite on the album, and I mean, I love the name of the song too, Death Church. I mean, this, you know, this could be on any thrash album, you know, the name of it, but I think it, yeah, or death metal, and I think it's a great topic. You know, talking about you know, kind of damning of organized religion. Hey, why not? So no, I think it's a great song. So like those are my favorites on the album.
Okay, cool. All right, so track number 7 is A Nation of Fire, which I actually like this song a lot more. I like the kind of the acoustic opening. It's calm at the start, you know, the vocals, and then it kind of builds up, and then you get that the tension, and then the chugging riffs all kick in. There's some catchy groove to it. A little ho-hum, I guess, in terms of the template. We've heard it already on the previous songs. But I mean, I think it's strong. I actually don't mind his vocals here. They get really aggressive. And for me, I love the whole balls out chug at the 4:30 mark. That's what I'm saying. When I hear that, I'm like, oh, I wish the whole album sounded like that. Then I'm in. But as Billy's been mentioning, you don't get that. They tease you with little moments like that, and then they pull back, and then they go back to something that you're like, what? What am I hearing? But you know, that's what you get on this album. But now you know my thoughts. But what do you think, Billy?
Yeah, so not surprisingly, I'm kind of on those same lines. I mean, here again for me, the this song in particular, the bass really kind of stands out. But also for me, like, so you know, like you said, like it builds, right? The slower parts and the slower vocals, I don't really like. Like I do find the heavier sections of the song are very like Pantera-like. But again, I don't like that, like with the slower vocals, it throws it off for me. And then kind of as you noted, right, like, you know, like the last minute, like it kind of gets like super aggressive, and for me it even almost sounds like crossover thrash, even a small degree, right, like suicidal, like tendencies on steroids, right, like, yeah, like if that was the whole song, I'd probably be happy. But yeah, again, it's that they take you through this journey with, like, again, probably 3 parts. You know, the slower part, the heavy Pantera part, then this like really aggressive thrash part, right? And as always, like one of those parts worked for me much better than the other. So yeah, that's kind of where I am.
Okay. And Jim?
Yeah, I like it better than Old, but I find it's got the same sort of, it's very repetitive. I do like the chug of guitars, but I mean, this song takes exactly 1 minute and 36 seconds to really start to kind of speed up. And it's kind of like, man, you know, like I get an intro, but it's almost like as we head into the back end of the album here, a lot of the intros start off really slow, continuous. So there's a lot of repetitiveness happening, but I do like it better than Old. And yes, that last minute where the really heavy chug kind of sees the song off, that's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I think we all agree there about that part of it. But what can you do? All right, so track number 8, Blood for Blood. Jim, start us off.
Yeah, this was great. It starts off with a really cool guitar riff. And the intro with kind of the sirens and stuff, the guitar riff kind of sounds like a siren. So it's kind of neat. That's what I got of it. And this is a heavy vocalized track and a heavy musicianship track. Probably the heaviest track maybe on the album. That's a really good one. I like this one. It kind of veers off from, you know, a really slow parts, I find it's generally pretty heavy and pretty solid.
Yeah, I think the same. And this is where the industrial kind of influence comes in, because that started the song. It's very much like you're getting this.
Yeah.
You get the industrial opening, which is interesting.
And Billy makes a good point about the length of the songs. This is like one of the shorter ones, and they kind of get to the point fairly quick.
That's
and
right.
There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's good. I think maybe on a couple of these songs, if they did chop a minute or two, you wouldn't miss it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Billy?
Yeah, so for me, this one, definitely an industrial style opening. For me, this song has very much like a later era, like Slayer feel to it. For sure, I find that, especially on the guitars. Like musically, I don't mind the track. I mean, there's actually some pretty like fast, like aggressive guitar leads, right? Again, kind of reminds me a bit of Slayer in a way. But like here, this one, like the vocals, there's like an electronic effect on the vocals.
Yes.
I don't know what you call it, but then I'm out. Like that vocal effect just kind of turned me off. But the song I like musically.
Yeah. I caught the vocal effect too, so it's weird. He almost comes across a little more like Max Cavalera with the shouts,
Yeah,
more
for sure.
upfront, aggressive shouting. Um, I I thought it's a bit cheesy where he shouts 1, 2, 3, go, and then it take. I don't know. I thought that was a bit of a cheesy way to kind of like bridge a tempo change, and then you get to the balls out chugging and the intensity right after. It's interesting. I don't mind the song as well. I think it's short enough for a song. I think if this was like 6 minutes, I would have lost it myself. I would have got bored of it, but for the length of the song, it's pretty solid. So I'm okay with this song. Okay, so we'll move on to track number 9, and that is "I'm Your God Now." What do you think, Billy?
Yeah, so this has some pretty intricate drum work going on in the background of the track. So that's pretty cool. But musically, this thing for me is like the slow parts is like Metallica's Black Album.
Exactly. I
Even
said the
singing
same
like
thing.
James, right? He sounds like
Yep.
James. And then the other cross is Pantera. And he actually, when he's singing that, he sounds like Phil in those sections, right? So for me, it's like, and so because of that, none of the song comes across as original. It just sounds like you're taking pieces from two far more popular bands and combining it. And yeah, then, so yeah, like for me, it doesn't work. Like I'm not a big fan here. I don't like that slower Metallica feel that he's doing there. I mean, I don't like that album to start with, so not surprisingly, I'm not going to like another band copying it. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of this.
It's funny. Your notes are exactly what I wrote myself. I was like, "Yep, this is like Black Era kind of Black Album style." And even the vocals, he does come across a bit like James at times,
Totally, yeah.
and the way he delivers the song. And it's about heroin addiction, because I know, as I mentioned earlier when we started talking about this album, he did heroin and actually did OD and came close to dying earlier on in his career, which I don't know. I don't get the whole drug thing. I never understood it, but whatever. But the song's about fighting heroin addiction, so maybe to him it's personalized. To me, I just think it's ho hum. But to each his own. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you guys hit it on the head. It's why anybody would want to recreate anything from the Black album. It's beyond me. I mean, Metallica did it. Yay for them. They made $1 billion off of it. But as far as stand-up material to this day, I just, and I know this was written many years ago. The slow intro, it just seems to be kind of like by now I'm kind of thinking no more slow intros. We're done. We know we can have that feeling. We can set the stage, but let's try something different. I would have liked maybe just a gunning, heavy riff coming right out of the gate, so that it just rips, starts as a shredder. I mean, we're getting to the end of the album here, but yeah, this one's one of the weaker ones for me on the album as well.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I agree. I think we all have similar thoughts on this one. So I'll take the lead on number 10. Realize, realize. So it's obviously an industrial song. So you can obviously tell right off the bat that they were listening to Ministry. So they probably were hearing "In the Land of Rape and Honey," "The Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste." So obviously that was my friend. It's like, yeah, Ministry right away. So it's basically about the LA riots in 1992. I don't mind it. I kind of wish maybe they actually wrote lyrics to a song instead. I think it would have been more effective.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of out of place for me. Although I like industrial music, I find this song doesn't make any sense. I'm like, why is this on here in the first place? Are you trying to be edgy? Because I almost get the feeling like maybe he thought this would be like a real cool thing to do since industrial is all the rage by mid 90s. I don't know. But the song is totally out of place for me. What do you think, Billy?
Yeah, no, like, yeah. So, I mean, I think the song title is kind of cool.
I like that. Yeah.
Without knowing, like what it was based on. But yeah, it's kind of interesting song title. But that's it. Like, otherwise, this is a complete, like, a bunch of noise, and I hate it. So, but yeah, I agree. Like, it's total, like, play on Ministry, right? But why do it? Like, this sounds like too much like Ministry. So, what's the purpose of it? Like, you're already taking pieces from like bands all over the place. Why go take this like from like a total Ministry style? Like, I don't get it. But yeah, this style of music's not for me.
Sure. And Jim?
Yeah, I think it's pandering. I think it's pandering to the times. I think they should have just put 10 tracks and left this one off, or they should have turned this into, instead of having all the junk on it, I think they should have had it as maybe an instrumental. And maybe at this point in time, maybe not necessarily in this placement of the album, but I think maybe to show off their chops a little bit, it would have been good for a 2.5 minute. I would have rather a full-on instrumental. It's kind of like that, I guess, in a way, but it just seems like very disorganized chaos. It just seems like I don't know what I'm listening to and why. So for me, it's just it's not even a bonus track. I mean, if they wanted to do this, they should have released it as maybe a bonus track, and that would have been okay, because then at least you could say, well, we got our tracks on here. But I would have just released this with 10 tracks and dropped that one.
It's funny what Billy just said. Like, you hear the song title, I wouldn't have gotten LA Riots out of it.
No.
Like, when you just looking at the title, and then when you hear the song, well, I don't even know if I call it a song, whatever, but you hear the sample and they're talking about the LA and at the time and what was going on. I just think to me they should have just wrote a song like with lyrics and sang it. I think it would have been more effective if you're willing to talk about like the Branch Davidians and shit like that. Then why not just write a song about the LA riots? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yes.
So maybe, like you said, Jim, maybe it's pandering.
Yeah.
Maybe there is some pandering going on here. I don't know. It's weird.
I mean, the album's over 55 minutes long.
Yeah.
Really long, right, for this period.
Yes.
So you could have easily left that out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I would have left.
Not like
out.
they were desperate to get to 35 minutes or something.
That's right. Yeah, I would have left it out. I wouldn't have put that song on this album, but I don't know. It's whatever. What can you do? And so, Jim, we'll stay with you on this one. The last track is number 11, Block. What do you think?
Oh yeah, it's a great way to end off the album. I think it's a good, tight, heavy song. I like it. Got that superior Pantera groove to it, and it's just you leave the realize kind of ball of confusion, and then you kind of again realign yourself for the end of the album. So I think the album's really well bookend, because I do like Davidian quite a bit, and the 11th block is good as well. So I mean, for me, it ends off the album really good. I think, you guys, Billy brought up 55 minutes. I would have settled on this about 42 and a half or 45 minutes would have been a bit tighter. But I mean, the album did really well. It must, it's revered as a very one of the bigger albums that was released that year and in the 90s. So what the hell do I know? But I think that it bookends the album and ends it off in style for sure. And you know what? This album really does. I think it should have a re-release, and maybe I don't think it's been re-released. I think it's got, you can buy different versions of it, like with some added.
Didn't they do a 25th anniversary? I
think it got canceled.
Oh, it got canceled? Okay.
It got canceled, yeah.
Oh, it did. Okay.
So, because they wanted to do the blackening or something. But I think that they should maybe do something with it. But I mean, although I got to admit, the production on the album doesn't really need to be cleaned up. I mean, it's fairly modern sounding, and it's not like the original Sepultura albums, where this is produced really, really well. So the production's on, it's great. But yeah, I find the album finishes up on a high for me.
Okay. And Billy, what are your thoughts on the song?
So it's my usual theory: pieces I like, pieces I don't like. I mean, it has some really good chugging guitar riffs, so some good moshing parts to the track. To me, it has a bit of a Sepultura chaos roots feel to the song, or maybe you could say Pantera groove, whatever we're gonna call it. So musically, I like the song, but again, not a big fan of the vocals. And here they use a bit more, some of the vocal effect again.
Yes.
Comes on, and that vocal effect just turns me right off. So yeah, musically not bad, but I'm not a big fan of the vocals.
I think what I'm noticing is the effects that they use on the vocals is always around when they get to the chorus. Like he says, he shouts "fuck it all," and it's like it's just the way he says it doesn't sound natural. So I almost get the feeling like that's where they want to use the vocal effects. I don't know. It's odd. It's very odd. I agree with you when I don't get that part of it either. The vocals here are generally harsher overall. I don't mind it. I like the bass. I like the bass a little bit. I like Adam Duke's bassist. He's an okay bassist. I'm surprised that this lineup didn't really last all that long, but in case we didn't mention it earlier, there's Adam Duke on bass and Chris Kontos on drums, and Logan Matter is the other guitar player. So a pretty solid musical lineup. But this, of course, a lot of these guys were replaced a few albums into their career. I even think after this album, was it Supercharger? They went totally in an alternative vibe, and a lot of people really hate that album a lot. But or is it Burn
Red?
Burn, yeah, that's the one. Yeah. The next two kind of, they flip the switch and they go more into an alternative style. It's not even following the template that they started here. So that's kind of funny. And then, of course, when they did the blackening, they went back to this because people were bitching that they wanted this more so than what they were delivering on the two preceding albums. So, but yeah, interesting. So, okay, that's the album in a nutshell. Do you guys have an idea for rating? I'll give you a rating. I'm gonna give it, for me, I'd give it a 7 out of 10 if I'm rating it for me. I can't go any higher than that.
No, I'd give it a 4.5.
Fair enough. Jim?
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little higher. I'm gonna give it an 8. I think it's I think it's somewhat groundbreaking in the sense of when it came out, and I think I think it did really well because people were waiting for sort of this type of thing to happen. I think it fuses everything from grunge to industrial to a little bit of thrash, maybe some death metal elements in there. I find it borrows a lot, and it kind of maybe a little bit of more of a hybrid metal album. I can see where Jason had called it a more of a kind of the start of maybe the new metal thing, but
yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of new metal, so I kind of tend to think this is more of just a hybrid of everything that was kind of happening at the time, and I think they just borrowed a lot. And I know their next album, the one I just mentioned, I think was their second best selling one. I think it did really well as well. I always thought Machine Head was kind of the band that could see the keys to the kingdom hanging there, but addiction and inner turmoil, which happens to a lot of bands, just kept them from maybe hitting those plateaus the way that they probably should have. I mean, I was supposed to see them live in late 2000 or in middle 2000s, like 2007 or whatever, and they canceled due to I think a drug issue. Somebody was in rehab, and I think I ended up picking up Testament instead, came, which was cool. So it's just, again, to the keys to the kingdom are there, and I think it's just maybe this album's more, not this album, this band is more of a what could have been and maybe what should have been rather than what actually happened. So
yeah, I would agree with that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
You have any final thoughts on this album, Billy?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess I never really found it like groundbreaking. Like, I find they just literally, and Jim kind of said this, they just took all the popular pieces at the time and they kind of put it together. So, like, I mean, I guess you could say that's original, that they took all the pieces that were already there and put it together. But at no point do I listen to this album and say, oh, that's really innovative because it's groundbreaking, because none of it is. Right? Like everything, to me has been done already. All they did is combine multiple styles and put it together. So that's maybe the innovative piece. But I guess I'm not surprised it's popular to people, because that was where the popular music at the time that they merged into this album. So I can see why it did well. But like, to me, I don't sit there and listen and say, wow, that's really, innovative, or that's really unique, and I get it, right? Like, when we're listening to Testament or whatever, like 20 albums in, you're not going to sit there and say that's groundbreaking. But
No.
like in 1994, like, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm being too harsh, but like, I just don't think there's anything here that says, wow, this is really like, interesting or shocking, or something I haven't heard before.
Yeah, that's a good thought. That's a really good point that you're making. And I guess when you're hearing it now, years later again, and going back to revisit it, of course, we're all on the same boat to some degree. It's like, wow, it's not that groundbreaking. But I guess in '94, I think
That's
it was
fair.
to some degree. Like the fact that the album cover is done by Dave McKean, that says a lot to me, because nobody was doing like graphic designed covers back then. It was all artwork. And then you get this guy who's a graphic designer who's basically building this piece without illustration. So it's kind of interesting.
Did
So
we
I think
show
that,
the album cover? I forget
oh
what it
yeah,
looks like right now.
I'll show. Hang on.
I don't own the album, so.
Cool.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so it's graphic design. I always like the cover, but I like the artist. So for me, that's the reason why I like it. But so maybe it was kind of groundbreaking for the time.
Well, I think it was. I mean, you think in '94, you've got, say, Deliverance from Corrosion of Conformity, which was amazing. That's another groundbreaking album. But it wasn't a huge, like, Annihilator had Kill the King, or King of the Kill.
Yeah.
But yet Korn was popular at the time. They were gaining speed, L7, bands like that. So I think that this maybe bridged a little bit of the gap a little bit. Far Beyond Driven, I think, came out that year. So, Pantera's, even though that I like that album, still a little bit of a slide compared to their first two. So, just changing, I guess, at that time. And in all fairness, Megadeth had Euthanasia out at that time too, which is as more of a thrash, kick-ass thrash, kind of keeping true to form there a bit. That was a great album. So for me, it's just, I think it just made me feel like, okay, this is something new. But I mean, now we're just dissecting it so many years later. There's a lot of stuff that you can hear throughout from everything else. I mean,
I think you guys both raise a fair point there, right? Like, looking back,
Yeah.
It's easier to be harsh, I guess.
Yeah.
Because literally, we're talking 94. Then we've heard everybody do this for like another like 27 years on top of it, right? So it sounds even more stale like today, but it probably not as stale as like in 1994.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think so. Okay, that was a really good discussion on Machine Head. So, with our podcast, before we close out, we always like to do kind of a ranking, either album or like songs, but we've decided to do our top 10 thrash albums in the 90s. And I think we all pretty much are picking mostly albums from 91, 90, 90 91, 92, maybe 93. I don't know. We'll find out. So who wants to be the first volunteer?
I'll go.
Okay, go for it, Jim.
Okay, I have one from 99 in here, so
cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
All
so
right.
I'm not in any order. I'm starting at 10 and working my way back,
Sure.
I guess. Coma of Souls, 1990. I mean, 90% of my 90 albums are going to be from 90. Overkill Horoscope, which we did a show on, 91, phenomenal album. Act 3, Death Angel, 1990 again. Heathen, Victim of Deception, another great album. We're doing show upon show. Number 6, Never Neverland, Annihilator. I think that was 92, was it? Or 90? Sepultura, Arise, 91. Gotta have that in there. Twisted into Form from Forbidden, 1990. My 1999 is actually The Gathering, Testament. That's cool. One of my, that's probably, it was my second in my ranking. So, and I think my other one was in the 80s. So technically that's correct. Seasons in the Abyss for Slayer, 1990 is my number 2. And Megadeth, Rust in Peace takes my top spot. So, and that's and we did a show on that too.
we did a lot of these bands we've already talked about,
but an honorable mention, really anything from Voivod in that time frame. Angel Rat, The Outer Limits, one of my favorite Voivod albums. And then I think they did one that was it, Negatron, I think, was in there as well too. So there's some great 90 Voivod albums as well. And they didn't put out as much, but it was really, really solid output.
Cool. All right. So we match a fair amount. There's a couple of differences, but we'll get to that. Billy, let's hear your ranking.
Yeah, I don't know what it was Jim said, but he said something that triggered me to realize I forgot a band. So, and I forgot Sodom, right? Like, so
yes,
two of my favorite Sodom albums from the 90s should have been in here, but yeah, so I totally forgot. I don't know how I did that. So I'll go through what I have. This is probably what I'd have to replace with the Sodom one, but so I had from 1992 Demolition Hammer.
Good choice. Good choice.
Just excellent album, mix of like thrash and death metal. And it's funny, like I'd say more than half these albums I've already showed, because some have done 90s list or Canadian band, so it was on a Canadian list, or it was on like a band specific. So this thing, number 9, Oblivion, From This Day Forward, 1990. I'm always talking about these guys. Love that album. Progressive thrash from Quebec. This doesn't need any introduction. Death Angel, Act 3. This thing pops up everywhere, but I just absolutely love this. Mekong Delta, Dances of Death. We didn't have this to show on our favorite album cover episode, so maybe we'll.
But there you go. Now we got it. Yes.
For an extra 2 seconds here. That was high on my list. Another one that I've got here, I thought maybe Jim, you might have this on your list, 1991.
Yeah.
Suicidal Tendencies, Lights, Camera. I just love this thing, right? I love the funk influence, just a lot of innovative songwriting. So really cool stuff. 1991, Coroner, Mental Vortex, Swiss technical thrash. Really like this album. It's either my favorite or maybe my second favorite, but just their most mature songwriting. Just really good. I really enjoy this. They have a Beatles cover. Even that's not too bad. So, and then Jim had this. So, and again, we've done this before already. So, Heathen. Then in my number three, Forbidden. No, we all know that. We've done that. We've done this one too. Horoscope. And then my number one for the 90s, Jim had this. We did an episode here, Megadeth, Rust in Peace. Easily the best thing Megadeth has ever done.
Yeah.
I would totally agree with you with that. Totally agree. Okay, so I don't really have a 10-1, but there is one that's going to be my top, but I'll start with number 10. So it'll be Sepultura's Arise. As you know, I'm really into that album. And then number 9 is going to be Overkill, the Horoscope, which I know we discussed already, but number 8, Forbidden, Twisted into Form, another pure classic, great album cover. Solid album, can't go wrong with that. Where's my number 7? Number 7 is Heathen from 1991. That's a Victims of Deception classic album. Totally love that album. Number 6, I'll put Megadeth, Rust in Peace. Again, I agree with you, Billy. It's the best thing Megadeth has ever done. No questions, hands down. Number 5, Death Angel, Act 3.
Yeah.
I'll put that there. Number 4, I will stick Sacred Reich, The American Way, which I totally love that album. Love it to death. Number 3, I'm putting Creator's Coma Souls. Probably one of my favorite Creator albums ever. Number 2, Anthrax, Persistence of Time, and that should be number 1, but I have one that will top that, and that is Destruction's Cracked Brain, which I consider that to be one of my favorite Destruction albums, and one of my favorites from the 90s. So that's my list for the top 10. Now, since I'm the host, and I picked it, I did pick 5 other albums I'm going to throw in there as honorable mentions, but they're all later era thrash bands that maybe deserve a little bit of talking about or just mentioning anyways. So I'll start with Darkane. They did Rusted Angel in 1999. It's a really good death thrash album. If you haven't heard it, seek it out. Then The Haunted, which I totally love. They're self-titled The Haunted 1998. That's a great album. I totally love those guys. They went kind of from death to more thrash, but pretty solid. And the Boiler Brothers are fantastic on this. And then I'll put Shadows Fall, Somber Eyes to the Sky, 1997. Again, a lot of kind of more death thrash, but solid first album release. And then, of course, Machine Head, I did stick him on this list because I guess it's Machine Head, but they wouldn't be in my top 10, but on this list. And Aura Noir, who did Black Thrash Attack in 1996. So there was some interesting thrash. I just noticed that in the later 90s, we started getting a lot of more death thrash than we are strictly thrash albums, but kind of a mix. So I think it's kind of cool that we're getting that kind of stuff. But that was kind of what I found for this week.
Cool.
Very much so. Billy, did you have any honorable mentions or anything you want to bring up?
No, I didn't pull anything, so
okay.
I'm not going to remember off the top of my head.
All right, no problems. No problems. All right, so before we wrap it up and announce our podcast for next week, do you guys have any further thoughts about Machine Head?
Nope.
No, all good? All right. So next week we're going to be handling, that's so funny to say that. Nuclear Assault, Handle with Care from 1989.
Yeah.
So we're going back to the late 80s for some good solid thrash. Tune in for that, so it'll be a really good podcast. And I think I'll probably mention it now. 2 weeks from now, we're also going to be doing Prong as well. So Beg to Differ, we're going to be handling, and we're bringing on a special guest. We're bringing on Jason from the Metal Pit, who will be coming on to be our fourth member to talk about that album. So that'll be 2 weeks from now. So, all right, guys, I guess it's been a long one. It's 11 o'clock already, so we've been doing this for like over 2 hours. With that said, I guess we'll just say goodnight, and we'll see you all next week.
Good night.
Have a good night.